The hallway of the high school was always noisy, with lockers slamming and students laughing. But for Amara, every step she took felt heavy, like walking through a storm no one else could see. And though she tried to keep her head down and avoid attention, trouble seemed to find her in the form of Travis, the boy who enjoyed watching her flinch. That morning, she had carefully balanced her books, hoping to make it to class without incident. But Travis spotted her across the hall, a grin curling on his lips as he stepped into her path, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear, as he mocked the way she dressed and the way she stayed silent. And before she could slip away, his hands shot out, knocking the books from her arms, sending them crashing to the floor with a sound that seemed louder than the laughter that followed, making her cheeks burn as dozens of eyes stared at her. Amara bent down quickly, clutching her books with trembling fingers, telling herself to breathe, to hold back the tears. But she could feel the sting inside her chest growing heavier, and though she wanted to shout, to fight back, something held her still, something deep inside whispering that if she spoke, if she revealed even a piece of her truth, everything would change in ways she wasn't ready for, because none of them knew who she really was. None of them knew the home she returned to each night, or the man who waited for her at the dinner table, a man whose face was known all over the world, a man who loved her fiercely yet respected her choice to live quietly. But in that hallway, none of it mattered, because in that moment she was just the quiet black girl who had become an easy target, and the cruelty of Travis's smirk felt sharper than knives. As she straightened, holding her books tightly against her chest, she forced herself to walk forward without saying a word, and the silence that followed her was filled with whispers and laughter that seemed to echo through her mind long after she left the hallway. And though no one noticed a slight shake in her hands or the way she bit her lip to keep from crying, Amara carried with her a silent storm, one that grew stronger with every insult, every shove, every cruel word. And while the students returned to their chatter as if nothing had happened, Amara's heart was already writing a different story, one that none of them could predict, because the girl they mocked was not as powerless as she seemed, and the truth hidden in her life had the power to change everything when the time came. Amara sat at the back of the classroom, her books stacked neatly on the desk, her pencil tapping softly as the teacher's words drifted past her ears like distant echoes. For though she appeared calm on the outside, her mind was crowded with the weight of a secret she had carried for years. A truth so large that even if she wanted to share it, she feared no one would believe her. Every time Travis or one of his friends smirked in her direction, every time they whispered her name like it was something to mock, she felt the pressure of holding back who she truly was. Because if she told them that the man who tucked her in at night, who gave her advice about strength and courage, was Vin Diesel, the same man who drove fast cars on screens and fought battles bigger than life itself, they would either laugh at her or suddenly treat her differently, and neither option felt safe. So she stayed silent, swallowing the words that tried to escape her lips, carrying the secret like a stone pressing against her chest. After school, when she climbed into the quiet black car waiting for her, she sank into the seat and finally let out a breath she had been holding all day, her driver offering her a polite nod but no questions, because he too knew the rule of silence. And by the time they reached the gated home, with cameras that blinked like watchful eyes, Amara had already decided to lock away the memory of Travis's shove and the cruel laughter of the hallway. Inside, the scent of dinner lingered in the air, and at the table sat her father, his smile warm but his eyes sharp, noticing instantly the tension in her shoulders, asking softly how her day had gone. And though she wanted to spill everything, humiliation, the anger, the loneliness, she shook her head, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, whispering that it was fine. And he, though not fooled, didn't press her, because he understood the weight of carrying battles silently, and he knew she would open up when she was ready. Yet as Amara lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, she wondered how much longer she could keep living to lives the girl mocked in hallways, seen as weak and quiet, and the girl who belonged to a family stronger than most people could imagine, because the secret she guarded was not just about who her father was, but about the strength he had poured into her since the day he had adopted her, telling her that her life, her voice, her heart, were worth more than the world's cruelty. And though she didn't feel strong yet, she felt something stirring inside her, something waiting to rise. And she knew that one day soon, the weight of her secret would not be a burden but a force that would shock everyone who had ever underestimated her. The next morning, Amara walked into school with her backpack slung over her shoulder, her eyes lowered as though she was invisible. But deep down she knew that Travis was waiting for her, because bullies could sense fear the way wolves sensed weakness. And sure enough, as she passed by the lockers, his voice cut through the hallway like a knife, mocking her for the way she walked, the way she dressed, and the way she never fought back. His friends laughed, echoing his cruelty, and though Amara tried to ignore it, the sting pressed deeper this time, especially when Travis shoved her books to the ground and whispered loud enough for everyone to hear that she was nothing, a nobody, a shadow who didn't belong there. And as the sound of laughter rose around her, Amara froze, her face burning, her hands trembling as she bent down to pick up her books. But this time something inside her cracked, a breaking point she had never felt before, because for years she had told herself to stay quiet, to keep her secret, to survive without letting the world know who she really was. Yet now she felt cornered, suffocated, and the silence that once protected her felt like a chain around her throat. Her heart pounded, her breath quickened, and though she wanted to scream, she forced herself to stand tall, gripping her books tightly and staring straight at Travis with a defiance she hadn't shown before. Her voice quiet but steady as she told him to stop, which caught him off guard, because he wasn't used to her speaking back, and for a moment the laughter around them faltered. But then he sneered and stepped closer, daring her to repeat herself, calling her weak and daring her to do something, anything, to prove him wrong. And in that tense second, Amara's body shook with rage and fear mixing together, her secret pressing harder than ever against her chest, because she wanted to shout that he had no idea who she was, that the man who raised her was someone powerful and unbreakable. But instead she clenched her jaw, holding it back, knowing the truth wasn't just about names or fame, it was about strength. And in that moment, even as tears threatened to spill, she felt a new fire rising within her, a fire that told her this torment could not continue, that she could no longer stand in silence while her spirit was crushed. As the crowd thinned and teachers appeared in the distance, Travis backed away, laughing again to mask the brief crack in his confidence. But Amara knew that something had changed, because while she walked to her next class with her head still heavy, there was also a strange lightness, the kind that comes when a person decides they have had enough. And later that night, as she sat across from her father at the dinner table, her fork untouched, Vin Diesel noticed the storm in her eyes, and gently asked what was wrong. And this time, Amara didn't lie. Her words spilled out in a rush about the shoves, the insults, the way the laughter followed her like a shadow, the way she felt small and invisible, and, though her voice cracked, she didn't stop, and for the first time she let her father see just how deep the pain had carved into her. And as he listened, his hand reached across the table, steady and strong, his eyes burning with quiet anger, not at her, but at the world that dared to treat his daughter this way. And he told her that she had something inside her stronger than any bully's words, that her breaking point was not the end, but the beginning, the place where her strength would rise and her voice would finally break through the silence. And as she leaned against him, feeling both safe and brave, Amara realized that tomorrow would not be the same, because she was no longer the girl who endured in silence. She was the girl who had reached the edge, and from here she would begin to fight back. The next day, when Amara stepped into the school hallway, the air felt different around her, as though something inside her had shifted overnight, because instead of walking with her head bowed and her steps hurried, she moved slower, straighter, and though the familiar whispers still floated around her, she carried herself with a quiet strength that made a few heads turn. And as she reached her locker, she found Travis leaning casually against it, his smirk already waiting for her, and the sight made her stomach twist, but not the same way it once did, because now she remembered the words her father had told her, words that echoed like armor in her chest. And when Travis sneered at her, asking if she was ready for another day of humiliation, she simply stared back without answering, which seemed to unsettle him more than any insult could have. But instead of stopping, he decided to push further, loudly mocking her in front of the crowd that had begun to gather, saying she was nothing and would always be nothing. And in that moment the pressure in Amara's chest grew so heavy that she knew she couldn't keep it locked inside any longer, because her secret was not a shield anymore, but a weapon waiting to be revealed. And before she could second-guess herself, she lifted her chin and spoke loudly enough for everyone around to hear, her voice steady though her hands trembled, telling Travis that he had no idea who she was or what kind of strength she carried. And when he laughed, brushing it off, she finally said the words she had been holding back for so long, telling him that the man who raised her, the man who taught her how to fight her fears, was none other than Vin Diesel. And the moment the name left her lips, the entire hallway fell silent, the whispers dying in an instant as dozens of shocked faces turned toward her, and even Travis, for the first time, looked uncertain, his mocking grin fading as though he wasn't sure whether she was lying or telling the truth. But Amara didn't give him time to twist it into a joke, because she went on, her voice stronger now, explaining that she was not ashamed of who she was or where she came from, and that she would no longer allow herself to be broken down by his words. And as the silence stretched, a ripple of curiosity moved through the students, some pulling out their phones, others exchanging wide-eyed looks. And though Amara felt exposed like never before, she also felt powerful, because the truth was finally hers to hold in the open instead of hiding in the dark. But Travis, unwilling to lose face, scoffed and muttered that it didn't matter who her father was, that she was still weak. Yet his voice lacked the sharp confidence it usually carried, and when Amara stared him down without flinching, he shifted uncomfortably as though the weight of the crowd's eyes pressed harder on him than any punch ever could. And in that strange breathless moment, Amara realized that this was not just about revealing her father's name. It was about revealing herself, the strength that had been buried inside her all along. And while the crowd slowly dispersed, whispering the revelation to one another, Amara walked to her class without looking back, her steps steady and her heart racing not from fear but from freedom, because for the first time she had spoken out. She had claimed her truth, and though she knew the road ahead would not suddenly be easy, she felt ready for it, ready to face the stares, the questions, the doubts, and even the envy, because now the world knew who she was. And more importantly, so did she. And that revelation, more than the name of her father, was what truly began to change everything. The days that followed Amara's revelation were unlike anything she had ever experienced, because the once silent girl who blended into the background was now at the center of every whisper, every curious glance, and every hushed conversation in the halls. And though she tried to keep her focus on her studies, the weight of her new reality pressed heavily on her shoulders. For some students treated her with sudden respect, asking questions and trying to befriend her, while others, jealous or doubtful, claimed she was lying and only using the famous name to shield herself. Yet what surprised her the most was the way Travis seemed to shrink in her presence, his loud taunts replaced with awkward stares, as though he could no longer find the courage to stand against her. And even though she thought that would bring her peace, it left her with a strange emptiness because the battle she had been fighting for so long was suddenly shifting into something new, something bigger than just defending herself against a bully. And one evening, as she sat at the dinner table with Vincent, she confessed how overwhelming it all felt, how the world seemed to have changed overnight. And he listened quietly before leaning forward and telling her that strength was not about winning every battle, but about choosing which ones were worth fighting. And those words settled deep in her chest, becoming a compass for the days ahead, guiding her as she faced the questions, the rumors, and the attention she never wanted but could no longer avoid. And as weeks turned into months, Amara slowly learned to use her voice not only for herself but for others who suffered in silence, standing up when she saw smaller kids being pushed around, offering comfort to those who struggled with loneliness. And though it scared her each time she stepped forward, she remembered the moment she revealed her truth, the silence of the hallway, and the strength it had unlocked inside her. And she realized that her story was no longer about being a victim but about becoming a beacon for others. Yet just when she began to feel steady in her new role, life tested her again when an unexpected opportunity arrived, because the school announced a national debate competition, and her teacher, who had quietly noticed the changes in her, suggested that she should represent their class. And though Amara's first instinct was to refuse, terrified of standing before an audience, Vin encouraged her, reminding her of how far she had come, and with trembling hands, she accepted, leading to weeks of preparation filled with sleepless nights, endless practice, and moments of doubt, until finally the day came when she stood on a stage, the spotlight bright and the audience waiting, her heart pounding as she held the microphone. And for a moment she thought the fear would swallow her whole. But then she remembered Travis's mocking face, the silence that followed her revelation, and the countless times she had held herself back. And she took a deep breath and began to speak, her words shaky at first, but growing stronger with each sentence, until the room hung on her every word. And when she finished, the applause that erupted was like a wave crashing over her, filling her with a feeling she had never known. And though she didn't win first place, she won something far greater, her own belief that she could rise beyond fear, beyond whispers, beyond the shadow of anyone else's judgment. And as she walked off the stage, Vin waiting with pride in his eyes, she realized that this was not just another step forward but the beginning of something entirely new, a chapter where she no longer lived in silence or fear but in courage and truth. And though she knew challenges would come, she was ready to meet them head, because Amara had discovered not only who her father was but who she herself was meant to be. And that discovery was the true transformation, the real victory, and the start of a new chapter that promised hope, strength, and a life no longer defined by shadows but by light.